Her mother's concerns lingered, but the wedding preparations continued at a dizzying pace. Olivia found herself wrapped up in a whirlwind of silks, jewels, and exotic perfumes. The women of Hamad's family guided her through the customs, teaching her what was expected of a wife in their culture. But before we dive into the story, drop a comment below about where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey, everyone. When Olivia's family arrived in Hamad's country, their faces were a mix of joy and concern. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering in her ear, "There's still time to change your mind, honey." But Olivia, dazzled by love and luxury, shook her head. "I'm happy, Mom. Everything will be okay." The wedding was a breathtaking display of opulence and tradition. Olivia, dressed in a gown straight out of a fairy tale, felt like a princess. The love in Hamad's eyes melted any lingering doubts she had. After 3 days of celebration, it was time for goodbyes. Hamad suggested Olivia's family should leave, reasoning that the couple needed privacy to start their new life. Still floating in a haze of happiness, Olivia barely noticed her family's reluctance as they departed. Watching their car disappear toward the airport, a strange feeling settled in her chest, an unease, as if a part of her had left with them, leaving her alone in this new world she was just beginning to explore. The first days after the wedding felt like a dream. Hamad showered her with attention, gifts, and promises of eternal love. They strolled through the mansion's gardens, shared romantic dinners under the desert stars, and spent hours discussing their dreams and future. But gradually, Olivia began to notice subtle changes in Hamad's behavior. What had initially seemed like gestures of love and protection started to morph into something else, something more controlling. The first hint came when Hamad suggested she delete her social media profiles. "My love," he said one afternoon, his voice soft but firm, "you're my wife now. You don't need those outside distractions. Here, you have everything you could ever want." Olivia, taken aback, tried to explain that those profiles were her way of staying in touch with her family and friends back in the United States. But Hamad insisted, his tone growing more authoritative. "It's for your own good, Olivia. The outside world will only bring trouble to our happiness." Reluctantly, Olivia agreed, convincing herself it was a small sacrifice for her new life. The next step was a change in her wardrobe. One evening, Hamad presented her with an entirely new closet, filled with abayas and veils. "These are the clothes appropriate for a married woman in our culture," he explained. Olivia, uncomfortable with the idea of covering herself completely, tried to negotiate. "But Hamad, I'm not Muslim. Surely I can dress a bit more Western." His expression darkened. "You are my wife now, Olivia. You must respect our customs. In time, you will understand and appreciate our way of life." Gradually, Olivia found herself isolated from the outside world. Her outings were limited to family or social events, always under Hamad's watchful eye. Calls to her family back in the United States became rare and brief, with Hamad always present, listening to every word. One day, as she reached for her phone to call her mother, she found it missing. A chill ran down her spine. Standing at the edge of everything she had ever known, Olivia felt like she was staring into an abyss. The fear of the unknown clawed at her, but his voice, Hamad's deep, soothing words, echoed in her mind, pulling her towards something beyond her world. Something thrilling, something dangerous. The next morning, Olivia sat across from her mother, the tension between them thick as the morning fog. "You're leaving?" her mother asked, her voice laced with concern. "I have to see for myself, Mom," Olivia replied, her fingers twisting in her lap. "Hamad says life there is beautiful. He says he loves me." Her mother's sigh was long and weary. "Take care, my child. The world outside isn't always as kind as it seems." But Olivia barely heard her. Her mind was already on the journey ahead, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. With her mother's reluctant blessing, she packed her bags, boarded a plane, and soared toward a life she had only ever dreamed of. The moment the plane touched down in Riyadh, the heat of the city wrapped around her like an unfamiliar embrace. The skyline was breathtaking, steel and glass towers piercing the heavens, while below, ancient markets and towering minarets painted a stark contrast. a city where old and new existed side by side. But nothing could have prepared her for the sight that awaited her as they arrived at Hamad's home. The mansion rose from the desert like an oasis, a sprawling palace of marble and gold. Lush gardens stretched around it, fountains glistening under the setting sun. It felt like something out of a fairy tale. But fairy tales, Olivia would soon learn, always had their dark corners. That evening, under the glow of chandeliers and the soft clink of silverware, Hamad stood. His eyes burned with intensity as he lowered himself onto one knee. The room fell silent. "My dearest Olivia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Her breath caught in her throat. She looked around, at the luxurious world surrounding her, at the man who had brought her into it. Her heart raced, torn between the rush of love and a whisper of hesitation. She didn't know then that saying yes wouldn't just lead to a marriage. It would lead to a life that would test everything she thought she knew about love, freedom, and herself. But in that moment, with his gaze locked onto hers and her pulse hammering in her ears, Olivia whispered, "Yes." From that night on, Hamad renewed his proposal every evening, showering her with gifts, promises, and the kind of devotion that left her breathless. It was intoxicating, and yet, with each passing day, a sliver of doubt wedged itself into her heart. Was she making the right choice? Was love supposed to feel this overwhelming, this consuming? Finally, a week after her arrival, she surrendered to the fantasy and accepted. Hamad's joy was boundless, and preparations for a wedding more extravagant than anything Olivia had ever imagined began immediately. Everything was moving so fast, too fast, and yet, swept up in the grandeur of it all, she could barely find the words to slow it down. In a rare moment of clarity, she reached for her phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed a familiar number. "Mom," she said, her voice caught between excitement and uncertainty. "I'm getting married to Hamad." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like an eternity. "Olivia," her mother's voice finally came through, heavy with worry. "Are you sure? It's too soon. You barely know him. His world, his culture, it's different." A flicker of unease passed through Olivia, but she pushed it aside. "Mom, I love him. He loves me. It's going to be perfect." But her mother's sigh told her what Olivia refused to admit. Sometimes, love was not enough. And sometimes, a dream life was just a beautiful illusion waiting to shatter. Her mother's concerns lingered, but the wedding preparations continued at a dizzying pace. Olivia found herself wrapped up in a whirlwind of silks, jewels, and exotic perfumes. The women of Hamad's family guided her through the customs, teaching her what was expected of a wife in their culture. When Olivia's family arrived in Hamad's country, their faces were a mix of joy and concern. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering in her ear, "There's still time to change your mind, honey." But Olivia, dazzled by love and luxury, shook her head. "I'm happy, Mom. Everything will be okay." The wedding was a breathtaking display of opulence and tradition. Olivia, dressed in a gown straight out of a fairy tale, felt like a princess. The love in Hamad's eyes melted any lingering doubts she had. After 3 days of celebration, it was time for goodbyes. Hamad suggested Olivia's family should leave, reasoning that the couple needed privacy to start their new life. Still floating in a haze of happiness, Olivia barely noticed her family's reluctance as they departed. Watching their car disappear toward the airport, a strange feeling settled in her chest, an unease, as if a part of her had left with them, leaving her. Alone in this new world, she was just beginning to explore. The first days after the wedding felt like a dream. Hamad showered her with attention, gifts, and promises of eternal love. They strolled through the mansion's gardens, shared romantic dinners under the desert stars, and spent hours discussing their dreams and future. But gradually, Olivia began to notice subtle changes in Hamad's behavior. What had initially seemed like gestures of love and protection started to morph into something else, something more controlling. The first hint came when Hamad suggested she delete her social media profiles. "My love," he said one afternoon, his voice soft but firm, "you're my wife now. You don't need those outside distractions. Here, you have everything you could ever want." Olivia, taken aback, tried to explain that those profiles were her way of staying in touch with her family and friends back in the United States. But Hamad insisted, his tone growing more authoritative. "It's for your own good, Olivia. The outside world will only bring trouble to our happiness." Reluctantly, Olivia agreed, convincing herself it was a small sacrifice for her new life. The next step was a change in her wardrobe. One evening, Hamad presented her with an entirely new closet, filled with abayas and veils. "These are the clothes appropriate for a married woman in our culture," he explained. Olivia, uncomfortable with the idea of covering herself completely, tried to negotiate. "But Hamad, I'm not Muslim. Surely I can dress a bit more Western." His expression darkened. "You are my wife now, Olivia. You must respect our customs. In time, you will understand and appreciate our way of life." Gradually, Olivia found herself isolated from the outside world. Her outings were limited to family or social events, always under Hamad's watchful eye. Calls to her family back in the United States became rare and brief, with Hamad always present, listening to every word. One day, as she reached for her phone to call her mother, she found it missing. A chill ran down her spine. She thought she was stepping into a fairy tale. Instead, she was walking into a gilded cage. It was a golden summer afternoon on the Amalfi Coast. The sea sparkled like scattered diamonds under the warm embrace of the sun, and Olivia's laughter blended with the waves as they crashed against the shore. She had always dreamed of a life beyond the quiet town she called home, a life filled with adventure, romance, and something extraordinary. And then she saw him. A tall, striking man stood just beyond the shoreline, the sun casting a halo against his sculpted features. His dark eyes held a quiet intensity, a world of secrets hidden beneath their depths. Hamad, a Saudi millionaire on vacation, whose presence alone seemed to shift the air around him. His confidence was intoxicating, his charm effortless. "It's beautiful here, isn't it?" His voice, deep and rich with an accent that made each word linger, sent an unexpected shiver through Olivia. She had no idea that those very words would change the course of her life forever. Under starlit nights, Hamad painted pictures of a world Olivia had never known: golden deserts, towering palaces, a life where she would never have to want for anything. "Come with me to Saudi Arabia," he whispered one night, his fingers trailing down her arm. "Let me show you my world." It was the kind of offer dreams were made of, a proposal wrapped in silk and promises. Her mother's worried eyes haunted her when she revealed her decision. "Take care, my love," she had whispered, holding Olivia's hands tightly. "The world outside isn't always as kind as it seems." Olivia barely heard her. She was in love. She was going to live a life most could only imagine. But dreams, Olivia would soon learn, could turn into nightmares overnight. The moment she stepped off the private jet in Riyadh, the air felt different. The city skyline was breathtaking, a mix of modern luxury and ancient tradition. Hamad's mansion was an oasis, grand, opulent, dripping in wealth. And yet, something felt off. The wedding was a dazzling affair, a spectacle of silk, gold, and music. Olivia's parents arrived, hesitant smiles hiding their unease. Her mother pulled her aside one last time, whispering urgently, "There's still time to change your mind." Olivia shook her head. "I love him, Mom. Everything will be okay." It wasn't. 3 days after the wedding, her parents left, and as their car disappeared into the horizon, Olivia's world began to shrink. At first, it was subtle. "You don't need social media anymore, my love," Hamad had said one afternoon, his fingers grazing her cheek. "You have me now." She hesitated. "But my family. The outside world is a distraction. Here, you have everything." Slowly, the restrictions grew. Her Western clothes vanished, replaced by flowing abayas. "A married woman in my culture must dress modestly," he explained. Her phone calls were monitored, then limited, then non-existent. Her dreams of becoming a nurse vanished. "Your role now is to be a good wife. Isn't that enough?" And then the ultimate blow. "Delete all your contacts, Olivia. Even your mother's number." Her stomach twisted. "Hamad, please. Just my mother's." His voice was gentle but firm. "I am your family now. It's for your own good." Tears stung her eyes as she tapped the delete button. And just like that, she was alone. The news of her pregnancy should have been a joyous moment. For a brief time it was. Hamad's excitement was unmatched, his hands resting protectively over her growing belly. "Our child will be the proof of our love," he said. But love had nothing to do with it. With each passing day, his control tightened. Her world, already suffocating, grew smaller. One night, Olivia woke up to hushed whispers outside her door. "Her parents are here," a voice murmured. Her heart leapt. "Mom, Dad." She rushed toward the door, but before she could take another step, Hamad was there, his face a mask of calm fury. "They won't be seeing you." Her breath caught. "Please, Hamad, just for a moment." "No." His hand rested on her belly. "Think of our child. Stress is dangerous." She opened her mouth to protest, but suddenly, darkness crept into her vision. Her body swayed. And then nothing. She woke up hours later, her body heavy, her mind foggy. Hamad sat beside her, stroking her hair. "Your parents called. They're not coming back. They said it's better this way." A sob tore through her chest. Lies. All of it. She curled around her growing belly, whispering, "I'll find a way out. I promise you, baby, I will." Because now, she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her child. The grand ballroom shimmered under 1,000 golden lights as Elena twirled in her exquisite silk gown. She had stepped into a dream, a whirlwind romance that had swept her from a quiet life in New York to the lavish palace of Khalid Al-Fayed, a wealthy and charming Middle Eastern businessman. "You're the most beautiful woman here," Khalid whispered, his deep voice sending shivers down her spine. The wedding had been a spectacle of love and grandeur, a fusion of cultures woven together with gold-threaded tapestries, rare perfumes, and endless celebrations. But as the festivities died down, Elena's mother pulled her aside, her eyes filled with unspoken worry. "Are you sure about this? There's still time to change your mind," she murmured. Elena smiled, brushing off the unease, tightening her chest. "I love him, Mom. Everything will be fine." But as the doors of the palace closed behind her, an unsettling silence filled the air. The first few weeks of marriage were a dream. Moonlit walks in the palace gardens, lavish gifts, promises of forever. But then the changes began. "You don't need these distractions," Khalid said one evening, gently taking her phone and deleting her contacts. "I am your family now." Elena laughed nervously. "But I need to stay in touch with my mom. Trust me, my love. The outside world will only poison our happiness." Her social media accounts disappeared next. Then her wardrobe changed. Elegant Western dresses were replaced with long abayas and veils. "I'm not Muslim, Khalid. Can't I? You are my wife now. You will respect our traditions." Each day, her world grew smaller. Calls to her family were brief and scripted, always under Khalid's watchful gaze. The vibrant woman who had once danced through the streets of Manhattan was fading into a ghost of herself. Then, the news of her pregnancy. Khalid was overjoyed. "Our child will be a symbol of our love." For a brief moment, Elena clung to the idea of motherhood as a beacon of hope. But her pregnancy only tightened Khalid's grip. "You must rest," he insisted, forbidding her from stepping outside. Guards were stationed at the gates. She was no longer just a wife. She was a possession. Months later, she gave birth to a son, Amir. Holding him in her arms, she felt a fierce determination ignite within her. He would not grow up in this cage. One night, while Khalid was away on business, she found a letter slipped beneath her door. A maid, Fatima, had taken pity on her. "Your mother came to see you," the letter read. "Khalid sent her away. If you want to leave, I will help you, but you must act fast." Elena's hands trembled. Was this her chance? Could she escape with Amir before it was too late? A knock at the door shattered the silence. "My love, why are you awake?" Khalid's voice was soft, yet it sent a chill down her spine. She hid the letter behind her back, forcing a smile. "Just checking on Amir." But as she turned, Khalid's eyes narrowed. He had seen something. The walls were closing in. Would she make it out alive? A soft melody plays as the screen fades in on Olivia, a young American woman, standing in front of a lavish mansion. She looks radiant in a wedding dress, but there's a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. She thought she had found love, a dream wrapped in gold and silk. But dreams can turn into nightmares. The wedding is an extravagant affair. Candles flicker, laughter fills the air, and her new husband, Hamad, holds her hand tightly, whispering sweet promises. Olivia smiles, pushing aside the gnawing feeling in her chest. Days turn into weeks. Olivia is showered with jewels, wrapped in luxury. But something feels off. Hamad starts making small requests. Hamad, delete your social media, my love. You don't need outside distractions. We have each other. Olivia hesitates, but she sees the warmth in his eyes. Slowly, she complies. Then the wardrobe change. Then the restrictions. Then the isolation. Olivia, softly to herself, it's just love. It's just care, right? But doubt lingers like a shadow. The pregnancy changes everything. Olivia's growing belly becomes an emblem of power for Hamad, a legacy. His control deepens. He forbids her from stepping outside, even into the garden. Her phone is monitored. Calls to her family are rehearsed under his gaze. Her mother senses something is wrong. Olivia's mother, over the phone, voice trembling. Olivia, are you happy? Tell me the truth. Olivia forces a smile, but her voice is robotic. Olivia, I'm fine, Mom. Hamad takes good care of me. She hangs up. She doesn't cry. She can't. Hamad is watching. As the months pass, Olivia fades into a shell of her former self. Her only solace is her newborn son, Samuel. Late at night, she whispers lullabies from her childhood, holding onto the last fragments of her identity. Then another pregnancy, another child, another layer of chains, and then the third. The moment she sees the positive pregnancy test, something inside her breaks. Olivia, whispering to her reflection in the mirror, I have to get out. A tiny seed of rebellion takes root. Hamad, now confident in his complete control, relaxes. Olivia is allowed into the garden, always under watchful eyes, but it's something. One day, an elderly gardener, eyes filled with quiet understanding, steps close. Gardener, low voice, pretending to work, ma'am. If you need help, there are people who can get you out. A slip of paper is pressed into her hand. That night, locked in the bathroom, Olivia unfolds the note. A single phone number. Call if you want freedom. Tears spill down her cheeks. She burns the note, memorizing the number. The following days are agony. Fear battles against hope. What if Hamad finds out? What if she fails? What if he takes the children? Then, she notices something terrifying. Hamad is changing. His mood swings violently. His control tightens. He wakes her at dawn, forcing her to memorize prayers. His eyes darken with something she doesn't recognize. Hamad, whispering, unsettlingly calm. You are no longer who you were, Olivia. You belong to me now. The final straw snaps. One night, Olivia creeps into the nursery. She kisses her sleeping children, pressing a silent promise to their foreheads. Then, clutching the only cash she has managed to hide, she dials the number. Ring. Ring. A voice answers. Unknown voice. Is this Olivia? Are you ready? She glances back at the bedroom door, where Hamad sleeps. Her heart pounds. Olivia whispers, voice shaking yes. A car is coming. A plan is in motion. But will she make it out before he wakes up? The dim glow of the chandelier cast flickering shadows across the grand estate. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant dreams, so close, yet impossibly far. Olivia sat by the nursery window, her fingers brushing against the cool glass as she listened to the soft breathing of her children. Her heart ached with a longing she could no longer suppress. 3 years ago, she had been swept into a whirlwind romance, believing she had found the kind of love that stories were made of. Hamad had been charming, devoted, and intoxicatingly passionate. But behind his loving words had lurked something far more dangerous, a hunger for control. Over time, the mansion that had once seemed like a palace became her prison. The warmth in his gaze turned cold. The sweet gestures soured into commands. The breaking point came when he ripped a book of American fairy tales from her hands, his face contorted with rage. "You fill their heads with lies," he spat, tearing the pages into shreds. "They will grow up as I say." That night, Olivia lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had to escape, not just for herself, but for her children. Under the watchful eyes of guards, she had little freedom, but there were cracks in the walls of her cage, tiny moments where the outside world slipped through. One such moment came when she met Amir, the old gardener. With calloused hands and kind eyes, he had seen too much to turn away. "If you need help," he murmured one afternoon, his hands pretending to trim the roses, "there are people who can help." Her breath caught as he discreetly slipped a note into her palm. That night, locked in the bathroom, she unfolded the small scrap of paper. A single phone number and 3 words, "Call for help." For weeks, she hesitated. Fear was a powerful chain. What if she was caught? What if they took her children? But when Hamad announced his plans to send their son to a strict religious boarding school, something in her snapped. She waited until the house was cloaked in silence, her heart thudding so loudly she feared it would wake the walls. In Hamad's study, she found the phone, her hands trembling as she dialed the number. "Hello," a voice, low and steady. Tears blurred her vision. "Please," she whispered, "help me." Before the voice could respond, a sharp creak pierced the silence. A shadow loomed in the doorway. Hamad. His face was a storm of fury and betrayal. "What have you done?" he growled, his voice laced with venom. She stumbled back, panic clawing at her throat. He lunged, grabbing her wrist. "You think you can leave?" His grip tightened. "After everything I've given you?" The children's cries echoed from their rooms. Olivia's pulse pounded. She had to stay strong. "Given me?" she spat, fire igniting in her eyes. "You've taken everything. My freedom, my identity. This isn't love, Hamad. It's control." His eyes darkened. Then, chillingly calm, he released her. "Fine," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "You want to leave? Go. But the children stay." Olivia's breath hitched. "No, you can't." A cruel smirk played on his lips. "In this country, the father has full custody. Walk out that door, and you'll never see them again." She swayed, the room spinning around her. The choice was impossible. And then a crash. A burst of light. The front doors flung open as figures stormed inside. Police officers. Social workers. The rescue she had prayed for. Hamad roared in fury, lunging forward, but strong hands restrained him. "Olivia," a woman's voice called. "Come with us." Tears flooded Olivia's eyes. She turned, gathering her children into her arms. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of chains breaking. As she stepped toward freedom, she didn't look back. But she knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Trapped in a gilded cage, the night air was heavy with silence, broken only by the slow ticking of an antique clock. Olivia sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling as she traced the faint scars on her wrists, the only reminders of a battle she had been fighting for years. She wasn't sure when her love story had turned into a prison sentence, but tonight, she had decided it would end. Introduction to conflict. Once, Olivia had been captivated by Hamad's charm. His love had felt like a fairy tale, one where she was the princess and he, the devoted king. But soon, the fairy tale had turned into a gilded cage. She had become nothing more than an ornament in his grand estate, a wife molded by his rules. 3 children in 3 years had drained her physically and emotionally, and Hamad's possessiveness had only intensified. First pattern interrupt. "Our legacy grows," Hamad had said when she told him she was pregnant for the 3rd time. But Olivia hadn't felt joy, only exhaustion. And fear. A fear that clawed at her insides, warning her that if she didn't act soon, she would lose herself completely. Rising suspense. She had spent months crafting her plan, gathering bits of information from overheard conversations and stolen moments on Hamad's study computer. The first breakthrough came when an elderly gardener, perhaps sensing her despair, slipped her a piece of paper with a phone number. "Call if you need help," he had whispered. Emotional depth and dilemma. She had memorized the number that night, but fear had kept her paralyzed. What if it was a trap? What if she failed and lost her children forever? But then, the moment of no return arrived. Hamad caught her reading an American fairy tale to their children. His rage was swift and violent. He tore the book apart and declared that if she did not obey, he would send their children away to a religious boarding school. The decision was made for her. Second pattern interrupt, heart pounding. Olivia waited until the house was asleep. She crept into Hamad's study and, with trembling fingers, dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice answered. Olivia. Tears welled in her eyes. Please help me. Just as she hung up, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. A shadow loomed behind her. What have you done? Hamad's voice was a slow, menacing whisper. Climax, ultimate confrontation. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. I have given you everything, and this is how you repay me. This isn't love, Hamad. This is control, she cried, yanking her arm away. His eyes darkened. Fine, you can leave, but the children stay. Shock stole her breath. You can't do that. Hamad smirked. In this country, they belong to their father. If you leave, you will never see them again. Twist in devastation, her knees buckled. The thought of leaving them was unbearable. But if she stayed, she would die a slow, quiet death, piece by piece, day by day. With tears streaming down her face, she took the pen he handed her and signed the papers, relinquishing her rights. Each stroke felt like carving her own epitaph. Hamad watched with a cruel smile. Good girl. Now leave. Final emotional blow and cliffhanger. She turned one last time, her gaze lingering on the hallway where her children slept. With a silent promise to return, she stepped into the waiting car. The driver pulled away, and the estate faded into the distance. As the plane lifted into the night sky, Olivia stared out at the shrinking lights of Saudi Arabia. She was free. But at what cost? Hook for future resolution. She wiped her tears, determination hardening her resolve. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Closing tease. What happens next? Will Olivia find a way back to her children? Or will Hamad's reach extend beyond the border she's escaped? Stay tuned for the next chapter of Trapped in a Gilded Cage. The air inside the grand mansion felt heavier than usual, suffocating Olivia with its silence. Every breath she took was laced with fear, every step an echo of the life she wanted to leave behind. Tonight she would escape. Her heart pounded in sync with the clocks ticking as she tiptoed through the dimly lit corridors. She hesitated outside her children's rooms, their peaceful faces illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the windows. Her fingers brushed their soft cheeks as tears welled in her eyes. "Mama loves you always," she whispered, pressing a kiss to each forehead. Her hands trembled as she reached for the study door. Inside lay her ticket to freedom, her passport, documents, and whatever money she could find. But just as she rifled through the drawers, the floor creaked behind her. She froze. "Going somewhere, Olivia?" Hamad's voice was like ice slicing through her spine. She turned slowly, dread curling in her stomach as she met his gaze. His face, once a source of love, was now twisted with fury and betrayal. "You think you can just walk away?" he growled, stepping closer. "After everything I've given you?" Olivia squared her shoulders, newfound defiance flashing in her tear-filled eyes. "I never asked for any of this. I want my freedom. I want my children to live without fear." Hamad scoffed, grabbing a document from his desk and slamming it down in front of her. "Fine, you can leave. But if you do, you sign this." Her stomach clenched as she skimmed the paper. It was a legal agreement. If she left, she would forfeit all rights to her children. "You can't make me do this," she whispered, horror dawning on her face. Hamad leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "You sign it, or you never see them again." The weight of the pen in her hand felt like a death sentence. With every stroke of ink, a piece of her soul shattered. And when she finished, Hamad snatched the paper away with a triumphant smirk. "Your things are packed. The driver will take you to the airport," he said coldly. "You are never to contact him again." Numb, broken, and hollow, Olivia walked toward the waiting car. As the mansion disappeared behind her, so did the last remnants of a life she once knew. She was free, at an unimaginable cost. The moment Olivia stepped onto American soil, reality crashed down on her. She had escaped her prison, but she had left behind the most precious part of her existence, her children. Grief threatened to consume her, but she wouldn't let it. She couldn't. The battle had only begun. Her parents welcomed her home with open arms, but their joy was shadowed by worry. "Where are my grandchildren?" her mother asked, her voice thick with unshed tears. The floodgates broke. Olivia sobbed as she recounted everything: the control, the threats, the impossible choice. Her father sat in silence, hands clenched into fists. "We will fight," he said finally, his voice a storm brewing beneath the surface. And fight she did. Olivia knocked on every lawyer's door, reached out to human rights organizations, and dove into research. Each time, she hit a wall. The legal system was a maze, and Hamad had crafted his trap well. The document she signed held weight, too much weight. "I won't stop," she vowed, her determination unshaken. "I'll find a way." But the nights were merciless. Nightmares plagued her, visions of her children reaching out, their tiny hands disappearing into darkness. She'd wake up, drenched in sweat, heart hammering against her ribs. Was she a coward for leaving? Would they ever forgive her? One evening, in a final act of desperation, she dialed Hamad's number. It rang and rang, then disconnected. Her emails bounced back. It was as if he had erased himself from existence, taking her children with him. She had to find another way. Months passed, each day fueling Olivia's resolve. Then a breakthrough. A journalist had caught wind of her story. A woman forced to abandon her children under duress, fighting an impossible legal battle. They wanted to expose the truth. The media storm began. Headlines flooded the internet. News stations picked up the story. Social media erupted in outrage. Then the unexpected happened. A message. A number she didn't recognize. She answered, her pulse spiking. "Olivia," a small, broken voice whispered. "Mama." Her breath hitched. "Samuel." "Mama, we need you. Please, come get us." A loud crash sounded in the background. A door slamming open. "Samuel." Olivia screamed. The line went dead. Darkness swallowed her, but in its depths, something burned bright: rage, fear, and an unshakable resolve. She was going back, and this time, she would not leave without her children. The night was silent, but Olivia's heart pounded like a war drum. Every breath felt like a risk, every shadow a threat. Hamad was asleep in their massive, cold bedroom, unaware of her plan. For years, she had lived in a prison disguised as a mansion, her every move monitored, her dreams crushed beneath his iron grip. Tonight that ended. She clutched a small bag, just enough to survive. More than fear, it was the weight of her children's absence that made her hesitate. Samuel, Alexander, and little Hannah, her whole world, were sleeping just a few feet away. Her chest ached as she crept into their rooms. She brushed her fingers across their cheeks, memorizing their warmth. "I love you," she whispered, tears slipping onto their pillows. "I will come back for you. I promise." A creak in the floorboards sent ice through her veins. She froze. Then nothing. Holding her breath, she moved toward Hamad's study. Her passport. She needed it. If she didn't have it, this escape would be over before it even began. Her fingers trembled as she searched his desk. Papers, contracts, documents there. The passport lay beneath a folder. But just as she grabbed it, a voice like a dagger in the dark. "So, you've made your choice." Olivia whirled around. Hamad stood in the doorway, his face shadowed but his fury unmistakable. She straightened. "Yes." His lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. "Then leave. But sign this first." He slid a paper across the desk. Olivia's stomach dropped as she read, a legal document relinquishing all rights to her children. Her knees nearly gave out. You can't ask me to do this." His gaze was ice. "Sign it, or stay." Tears blurred her vision. Was this really her only choice? Trembling, she picked up the pen. Every letter she signed felt like she was carving her own heart out. When she was done, Ahmad took the paper, scanned it, and nodded. Your driver is waiting. As she walked away from the house that had caged her, the sobs finally came. She had lost everything. Or had she? No, this wasn't over. The plane landed in the U.S., but Olivia felt like a ghost. Home had never felt so foreign. Her mother's arms wrapped around her, warmth and sorrow mixing in one embrace. But when her mother pulled back, her eyes held one question. Where are my grandchildren? That's when the dam broke. Olivia collapsed, sobbing as she told them everything. Her father's fists clenched. Her mother wiped away her own tears, but there was steel in her voice. We will fight. The battle began immediately. Lawyers, human rights organizations, international courts. Every door she knocked on felt like another dead end. You signed away custody, one attorney said, shaking his head. Legally, your case is near impossible. Despair clawed at her, but she refused to break. She couldn't. Then a lifeline. Marie, a woman who had fought the same war. She introduced Olivia to an international child rights group. For the first time in years, Olivia had hope. Meanwhile, back in Saudi Arabia, her children were growing up under Hamad's control. He told them their mother had abandoned them, that she never loved them. But Samuel, now almost 10, refused to believe it. She told me she'd come back, he whispered to Alexander and Hannah at night. Mama would never leave us. And in America, Olivia was proving him right. 5 years. That's how long she fought. 5 years of courtroom battles, sleepless nights, and endless rejection. Then, one phone call changed everything. Her attorney's voice was breathless. A lawyer in Saudi Arabia is willing to take your case. It was a crack in the wall. But to Olivia, it was a sunrise after an endless night. She flew into action. Documents, hearings, witness testimonies. Every moment was a battle. But she was no longer the broken woman who had left her children behind. She was a warrior now. The final hearing arrived. Olivia stood across from Hamad in the courtroom. He was as powerful as ever. But she saw something different in his eyes, fear. He knew she was stronger now, that she would never stop. The judge read the final decision. Silence. Then, her attorney turned to her, eyes shining. She had won. Tears streamed down her face as she fell to her knees. The courtroom blurred. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But it was. She was getting her children back. The airport was loud, but all Olivia could hear was the pounding of her heart. She stood at the gate, hands shaking. Then a small voice. Mama. She turned. Samuel. Alexander. Hannah. Their faces were older, but their eyes were the same. She dropped to her knees as they ran into her arms. The weight of them in her embrace shattered every lonely night, every moment of despair. She was whole again. Samuel whispered into her ear, I told them you'd come. And she had. But was this truly the end? Or just the beginning of another battle? As Olivia tucked her children into bed that night, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You took them from me. Now I'm coming for you. Her blood ran cold. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The house was silent, but Olivia's heart pounded like a war drum. Every breath felt like a crime. She moved cautiously through the dimly lit hallway, her bare feet pressing against the cold marble floor. In the nursery, her children, Samuel, Hannah, and little Alexander, slept peacefully, unaware that their world was about to shatter. Tears burned her eyes as she knelt beside them, brushing strands of hair from their innocent faces. Mama loves you, she whispered. I'll come back for you. I promise. Her hands trembled as she reached for her passport in Hamad's study. Just as her fingers closed around it, a shadow loomed behind her. Going somewhere, Olivia? Hamad's voice was quiet, but the menace in it sent a shiver down her spine. He stepped forward, his face twisted in fury. So, you've made your choice. Olivia forced herself to stand tall, despite the fear curling in her stomach. This isn't love, Hamad. It's a prison. I won't let my children grow up in fear. Hamad's lips curled into a cold smirk. Then leave. But you'll sign this first. Her blood ran cold as he placed a document in front of her. The words blurred, but the meaning was clear. If she left, she forfeited all rights to her children. "You can't ask me to do this," she whispered, horror strangling her voice. "I can, and I am." Every cell in her body screamed against it, but the weight of oppression crushed her resolve. With shaking hands, she signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like carving a piece of her heart away. When the ink dried, so did his love. "Your ride is waiting outside. Do not come back," Hamad said, his voice devoid of emotion. As she was driven away, she turned back one last time. Her children, her home, her past, everything blurred into the night. She was free. But at what cost? New York was a city of endless noise, but Olivia felt deafened by silence. She was home, yet she was lost. Her mother's arms wrapped around her the moment she stepped through the door. "Where are the children?" she asked, her voice fragile. Olivia broke. The sobs she had held back for so long came rushing out as she told them everything. The fear, the control, the unbearable choice. Her father's fists clenched. "We'll fight." And fight she did. She spent days in law offices, nights researching international custody laws. The answer was always the same. Her case was impossible. Hamad's wealth and influence were a fortress she couldn't breach. Then she met Marie. Marie had walked the same hellish path, and she had won. "There's a way," Marie said, "but it won't be easy." For the first time in years, hope flickered in Olivia's chest. She contacted international human rights organizations, built a legal team, and became the voice for countless women like her. Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia, Samuel refused to believe the lies his father told. "Mama didn't leave us." "I know she didn't." Hannah clutched a tattered photo of Olivia. "Will she ever come back?" "She will." Samuel's eyes burned with quiet rebellion. "She promised." 5 years passed. 5 years of battling in courtrooms, fighting laws designed to keep her away. Then, one day, a single email changed everything. Ahmed Al-Assal, a Saudi lawyer, had found a crack in Hamad's armor. "The custody agreement grants him full rights, but it does not explicitly forbid you from seeing them," he explained over video call. "We may have an argument for supervised visitation." Olivia's heart pounded. "Do we have a chance?" Ahmed hesitated. "It won't be easy." "But, yes." The day of the court hearing, Olivia walked into the Saudi courtroom, her headscarf neatly in place, her spine unbreakable. Hamad sat across from her, his cold eyes narrowing. The trial was brutal. Ahmed fought passionately, arguing that Olivia's presence was essential for the children's well-being. Then, the judge turned to Hamad. "What do the children want?" The room fell silent. No one had dared to ask them. When Samuel entered, Olivia gasped. He had grown, but his eyes, they were still his father's defiant twin. "I want my mother," Samuel said firmly. "We all do." Hannah and Alexander nodded, clinging to their older brother. A crack, a shift in power. For the first time, Hamad looked uncertain. The judge sighed heavily. "The court will reconvene in 1 week for a final decision." A week. 1 week to decide if Olivia would hold her children again or lose them forever. As she walked out of the courtroom, Hamad caught her wrist, his grip tight. "You started a war, Olivia." His voice was low, dangerous. "Are you ready for what comes next?" She met his glare with steel in her gaze. "I was born ready." And with that, she walked away, knowing that the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Olivia sat still, her fingers digging into the fabric of her skirt, as Hamad's lawyer painted her as a reckless woman who had willingly abandoned her children. Each cruel word was a dagger to her heart, but she refused to break. She had come too far to crumble now. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. "This court has decided that it is in the children's best interest to maintain some form of contact with their mother." Olivia's heart slammed against her ribs. Had she heard correctly? "Therefore," the judge continued, "the mother is granted monthly supervised visits with her children. These visits will take place in a natural environment under the supervision of a court-appointed social worker." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. 5 years of agony, of sleepless nights, of desperate prayers. This was not complete victory, but it was the first real step. Hamad clenched his jaw, fury radiating from him. "I will appeal," he spat under his breath. But Olivia no longer feared his threats. She had a chance now, and she would not let it slip away. 2 weeks later, Olivia stood at the visitation center, her heart pounding like a war drum. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. What would she say? What if they didn't remember her? What if they hated her? The door creaked open. Samuel, Alexander, and Lily stepped in hesitantly, their small faces filled with uncertainty. They had grown so much. She drank in every detail. The way Samuel, the eldest, stood protectively in front, how Alexander clutched his sister's hand, how Lily's big brown eyes held both curiosity and fear. She wanted to run to them, to hold them, to breathe them in, but she held herself back. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I'm your mom," she whispered. "I've missed you all so much." Silence. Then Samuel took a step forward. "I remember you," he said softly. "You used to sing to us in English." The dam broke. Olivia let out a strangled laugh between sobs. "Yes, sweetheart, I did." Slowly, the children moved closer, hesitantly at first, then all at once. A hesitant touch, a whispered name, and then a hug. A real, warm, trembling hug that Olivia never wanted to let go of. The 2-hour visit blurred by tentative conversations and quiet moments of rediscovery. Too soon, the social worker signaled it was time to part. "Will we see you again?" Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. Olivia knelt before them, pressing a kiss to each forehead. "Yes, baby. I will fight for you. I will never stop." Samuel nodded. "We'll wait." As they were led away, Olivia clenched her fists. This was only the beginning. The fire within her had been reignited. She was no longer just a grieving mother. She was a warrior, a mother at war. She had faced impossible odds before, and she had survived. Now, she would fight harder than ever. Hamad's appeal loomed over her, but Olivia refused to back down. With Carlos and Ahmed by her side, she dove deeper into the legal battle, determined to dismantle every obstacle between her and her children. Months passed, and the visits continued. Slowly, her children began to open up. The bond that Hamad had tried to sever was healing, reforging stronger than before. Then, one day, a phone call changed everything. Carlos's voice was urgent. "Olivia, the appeal has been denied." Time stopped. She gripped the phone. What does that mean?" "It means," Carlos said, barely containing his excitement, "you can push for custody." Her breath hitched. For the first time in 5 years, true hope burned in Olivia's chest. This war wasn't over, but now she could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and she was ready to fight to the very last breath. The courtroom was silent, except for the rhythmic ticking of the judge's clock. Olivia's hands trembled as she clutched the arms of the chair. 5 years, 5 agonizing years since she had last held her children. And now, the verdict that could change everything was just seconds away. Months earlier, Olivia had stood beneath the bustling skyline of New York, staring at the courthouse that held her last shred of hope. Once a dedicated nurse, her world had crumbled when her marriage to Hamad, a wealthy but controlling businessman, turned into a prison. The day she fled Saudi Arabia, leaving behind her 3 children, had been the hardest choice of her life. A choice made not out of abandonment, but out of desperation. Determined to reclaim her children, Olivia spent years rebuilding herself. Therapy, legal battles, and a tireless pursuit of justice became her daily routine. Every night, she whispered to the faded pictures of her children, "Mom's fighting for you. I won't give up." Then, she met Carlos Mendoza, a relentless attorney with a reputation for taking impossible cases. Together, they connected with Ahmed Al-Assal, a lawyer in Saudi Arabia willing to challenge the system. There might be a loophole, Ahmed had said over a crackling video call, causing Olivia's heart to skip a beat. A way to see her children again. A chance to break the chains Hamad had forged. The courtroom was cold. Hamad sat across from Olivia, his expression unreadable. The legal war had begun, and both sides were prepared for a brutal fight. "The mother has abandoned her children," Hamad's lawyer declared. "She willingly relinquished custody. She cannot be trusted." Olivia flinched, but held her ground. Ahmed countered. She was coerced into signing those papers. A mother's love is unwavering, and these children deserve to know the truth. Back in Saudi Arabia, Olivia's children were growing up under Hamad's strict rule. Samuel, the eldest at 10, secretly held onto the bedtime stories his mother once told him. Hannah, now 8, often dreamed of the woman with a warm smile, and little Alexander clutched the worn-out teddy bear his mother had given him, refusing to let go of the one piece of her he had left. The judge's gavel struck. I will need time to deliberate. A month. Another unbearable month. In that time, Olivia's fight extended beyond the courtroom. The media caught wind of her story, and soon, she was speaking at human rights conferences, her voice becoming a rallying cry for mothers torn from their children. The world listened. Support poured in. Even as exhaustion took its toll, Olivia pressed on. The verdict day arrived. Olivia's heart pounded. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber. After careful consideration, this court rules in favor of allowing supervised visitation between the mother and her children. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. It wasn't a full victory, but it was something. A chance to see them, to hold them, to remind them who she was. 2 weeks later, Olivia walked into the sterile visitation center. Her hands shook as the door creaked open. 3 children stood at the threshold. Samuel was the first to step forward. I remember you, he whispered. You used to sing to us in English. Olivia sobbed, kneeling as her arms reached for them. Hesitantly at first, then all at once, her children fell into her embrace. The warmth of their tiny bodies against hers was more precious than anything in the world. The visit ended too soon. As they were led away, Olivia called after them. I'll see you again. I promise. Hamad was furious. He vowed to appeal. The legal war was far from over. But Olivia had something now that she hadn't had in years. Hope. As the sun set over the city, she whispered to the wind, no matter how long it takes, no matter what I have to do, I will bring you home. And so, the battle raged on. But this time, Olivia was ready to win. The courtroom was silent. The air is thick with tension. Olivia could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears as the judge turned to face her. This was it. 5 years of heartbreak, 5 years of fighting, all leading to this moment. How did it come to this? Rewind 5 years. Olivia Martinez, a vibrant, ambitious woman, had once believed in love. She had fallen for Amir Al-Fayed, a charming businessman from Dubai. Their love story was like a fairy tale, until it wasn't. After moving to Dubai with him, Olivia's world began to unravel. The man she loved became possessive, controlling. And then, the ultimate betrayal. He took their children away. Now, in a cold courtroom thousands of miles away from the life she once knew, Olivia sat across from Amir, her ex-husband and the man who had turned her life into a waking nightmare. Ms. Martinez, you understand that under UAE law, custody is awarded to the father after a certain age. The judge stated firmly. Yes, Your Honor, Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. But my children deserve a choice. Beside her, Carlos Mendoza, her American lawyer, exchanged a glance with her Saudi co-counsel, Ahmed Al-Salem. They knew how slim their chances were. Amir had wealth, influence, and the law on his side. But Olivia had something stronger, a mother's love. The battle had been grueling. Olivia had spent sleepless nights, poring over legal documents, fighting through endless red tape. Every denial, every rejection, every moment of despair had nearly broken her. Nearly. Then, a glimmer of hope. Ahmed had found a loophole. While the law granted Amir full custody, it did not explicitly forbid the children from having supervised visits with their mother. We can argue that consistent visitation is in their best interest, Ahmed had explained. It's not much, but it's something. And so they fought. And after months of legal warfare, the court granted Olivia her first victory. Supervised visits. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. For the first time in 5 years, Olivia saw them. Samuel, her eldest, now 13, stood protectively beside his younger siblings. Lena, barely 10, clung to his hand, her eyes wary. And the youngest, 6-year-old Leo, hid behind them, his small frame trembling. Her heart shattered. but she forced a smile. "Hi, my loves," she whispered, kneeling before them. "I've missed you so much." Silence. Then a hesitant step forward. "Samuel, I remember you," he said softly. "You used to sing to us." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I still do, sweetheart. Every night." That first meeting was brief, but it was enough. A flicker of hope. Over the next few months, Olivia used every second of her supervised visits to rebuild what had been stolen from her. She told them stories of their childhood, played their favorite games, reminded them of a love that had never wavered. Then one day, during a visit, Samuel spoke words that changed everything. "Mom, can we come live with you?" Her heart stopped. She faltered. "Sweetheart, nothing would make me happier, but your father." "I know," he interrupted, his voice fierce with determination. "But don't we have a say?" And just like that, a new fire ignited in Olivia's soul. The next battle was set. If the children themselves expressed their wish to be with their mother, the court might have no choice but to reconsider custody. The final hearing arrived. Olivia stood in court, holding her breath as Samuel, Lena, and Leo took the stand. Their words, filled with raw emotion, shook the courtroom. "We love our father," Samuel admitted, "but we love our mother too, and we want to be with her." The courtroom held its breath. Even Amir's expression flickered with something doubt, fear. Then the judge spoke. "After reviewing the evidence and hearing the children's testimony, this court grants joint custody to Ms. Martinez and Mr. Al-Fayed." Olivia gasped. The words echoed in her mind. Joint custody. She had won. Amir stormed out, furious, but Olivia didn't care. Her children ran into her arms, and for the first time in years, she held them without fear. As the sun set that evening, Olivia whispered a promise to the wind. "We're together again, and I will never let you go." But just as she thought the battle was over, an anonymous letter arrived at her doorstep. It read, "They were never yours to take. Watch your back." A storm raged outside the towering courtroom, but inside Olivia's heart, an even greater tempest brewed. She sat in silence, hands clenched into fists beneath the heavy wooden table. Across from her, Hamad, once the love of her life, now the architect of her greatest suffering, watched her with cold, triumphant eyes. Her breath hitched as her lawyer rose, voice unwavering. "Your Honor, my client was deceived. She was led into a marriage where she was stripped of her rights, trapped in a foreign land, and when she fought back, her children were taken from her. But she is their mother, and no law, no man, should deny her that." Hamad's lawyer scoffed. Olivia willingly abandoned her children. She left them for her own selfish desires. "My client has provided them with a stable home, a good life. She is nothing but a ghost from their past." Every word cut Olivia like a blade. Her own children, did they even remember her? Did they believe she had left them by choice? The judge finally spoke, his deep voice silencing the room. "I will deliberate and announce my verdict in 1 month's time." A month. 30 more days of agony, of waiting, of hoping. Olivia swallowed the scream clawing at her throat. She forced a smile when her best friend, Clara, met her outside. "You need to eat, Liv." "I need my children." Clara sighed. "You'll need strength for that." But Olivia barely ate, barely slept. Every night, she dreamed of their faces, their laughter, their tiny hands reaching for her. And every morning, she woke up to the unbearable silence of their absence. Finally, the day arrived. Olivia's hands trembled as she stepped into the courtroom, her pulse a deafening drum in her ears. The judge began. After careful consideration of all factors, including the best interests of the children, this court grants supervised monthly visits between the mother and her children. The words hit Olivia like a tidal wave. Not full custody. Not yet. But it was something. A beginning. Hamad's lips curled in anger. "I will appeal this." Olivia squared her shoulders. "And I will fight back." 2 weeks later, she waited in a sterile visitation room, heart pounding. Then the door opened. 3 figures hesitated at the threshold. Samuel, her eldest, stood first, taller than before, his once childish face now edged with caution. Lily clutched his hand, her wide eyes searching Olivia's face. And Alexander, her baby, barely 5 when they were torn apart, now almost 10. Tears blurred her vision. I've missed you so much. Silence, and then a whisper. I remember you. Samuel. His voice held uncertainty. But there it was, the flicker of memory. The song she used to sing to them at night. Hope. The visits continued. Slowly, the distance between them shrank. They spoke, laughed, rebuilt the fragile bridge of trust. And then one day, Samuel asked the question that would change everything. Mama, could we live with you? Her heart stopped. What? His voice was firm. We're not little kids anymore. Shouldn't we have a say? Tears welled up, but she fought them back. This was it. This was their chance. The courtroom was packed. This time, Olivia wasn't just fighting for visitation rights. She was fighting for her children's voices to be heard. Her lawyer presented their case with precision. Your Honor, the children are of an age where their wishes must be considered. They desire to spend time with both parents. The current custody arrangement is unjust. The judge turned to Samuel. Do you wish to speak, young man? Samuel stood, voice steady. We love our father, but we love our mother too. We want to know her world, her life. We deserve that chance. Even Ahmad looked shaken. The courtroom fell into tense silence. The judge finally spoke. After reviewing the case and hearing testimony from the children, the court grants shared custody. The children will spend half the year in the United States with their mother and the other half in Saudi Arabia with their father. A gasp echoed through the chamber. Olivia felt her knees buckle. Shared custody. A dream she had barely dared to. Hope for was now real. Ahmad surged forward. I will appeal. Olivia turned to him, her voice steady. I will always fight for them. That night, as she packed for their first trip home, she called her mother. Mom, we're coming home. All of us. Outside, the city that had once been her prison now gleamed under the moonlight, the stage of her greatest victory. But deep in her heart, Olivia knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Thank you for joining me on this unforgettable journey. Olivia's story reminds us that sometimes dreams come wrapped in shadows, and true strength is found in love's resilience. How did you like this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What's your score? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to catch all our stories. For more emotional tales, click here on the end screen.